बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जयम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रत्यक्ष अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमती स्वांग श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जयम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रत्यक्ष अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जयम विष्णुपाद श्री गौर किशोरदास महाराज की जय। जयम विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। जयम विष्णुपाद वैष्णव साधुओं श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भट्टदास श्री गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्री दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत दादा शिवसादि गौर भक्त बंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोरेश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा मई की जय। यमुना मई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय। समाविद भक्तवंद की जय। गौरव प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ऑल glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the Gyan Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada की जय। Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Apatreshu Nityam Bhagavate Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Mugyanti Miranda Snana Salakya Chakshurmandamena Tasmai Shri Guru Nama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vaidaka Shri Vasadi Guru Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mohan Purvachara. Hare Krishna. So welcome you all to Saturday morning Srimad Bhagavatam summary study class. Today we'll discuss from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, chapter 23, text 29 to text 57. Before we start, I'll just come to the previous speakers, what he would have touched, so that we have the smooth flow of the chapter. So Devahuti and Kardamuni get married. Thereafter, Devahuti serves Kardamuni, loving devotional move. And over a period of time, she even neglects her own body in the process of serving him, and she becomes very skinny and very thin. And seeing her, Kardamuni once develops a lot of compassion for her, and he tells her that he has got a lot of blessings on the spiritual front, and he would like to share them with her. And he exhibits her these opulences also. And he says that she also gets a part of these opulences, being her good wife. And in the process, she reminds, Devahuti reminds Kardamuni about the promise he made about their children, for which she wanted a proper home to be made available so that they can have union and a progeny can be made. So from then onwards, Kardamuni creates an aerial mansion, and before making her to board the aerial mansion, he asks her to take a bath in Bindu Sarovar, and she has a lot of dirt in her body and she's not matted hair, etc. But he gives her about 1,000 maid servants due to him by his yogic power. So they all help her taking her bath in the Bindu Sarovar, and as she finishes her bath, she comes out of it, and then the chapter goes on like this. From today we'll discuss. So she regains her original beauty after she takes her bath in the Bindu Sarovar. We start text number 29. Then they decorated her. I'll read the translation because we'll read the slokas for some of the important slokas. Translation for 29. They then decorated her with very excellent and valuable jewels which shone brightly. Next, they offered her food containing all good qualities and a sweet, inebriating drink called asavam. So this, they decorated, after giving her bath, they decorated very nicely with all of nice, valuable jewels. And they gave her also a nice food and also gave her a drink called asavam. This asavam is nothing but an Ayurvedic drink that helps in maintaining the bodily metabolism. It's not an alcohol. Text number 30. Then in a mirror, she beheld her own reflection. Her body was completely freed from all dirt, and she was adorned with a garland, dressed in unsullied robes, and decorated with auspicious marks of tilaka. She was served very respectfully by the maids. So then they gave her a mirror, and she looked at the mirror, and she was completely free from all the accumulated dirt in her body. They gave her a garland, and some marked her body with auspicious marks of tilaka. So this tilaka is something that is we also put in our body, which is very auspicious to have in our body and also a sort of protection. Text number 31. Her entire body, including her head, was completely bathed, and she was decorated all over with ornaments. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrist and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. So, as per Shastra, normally ladies take two types of bath. Normally, on a regular day, they take bath up to their neck, which is called Malasnana. And then on festivals, they take a full bath, including the head, which is called Sirasnana. This is because normally ladies have long hairs, and by taking bath on every day on with long hairs, there is a tendency that they could be falling sick. So that is why the Shastras recommend two types of bath for women, and that is a Malasnana and Sirasnana. So on Sunday, on festivals, on important occasions, they take the Sirasnana, which is the full bath, including the head. Text number 32. About her hips, she wore a girdle of gold, set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and with auspicious substances. So then she was served with very auspicious items uh, like turmeric powder. Turmeric is supposed to be very, very auspicious, particularly for women. And then it is mixed with mustard seed oil. And after this is used before bathing, and after bathing, some auspicious items like kumkum, saffron, and sandwood pulp are used. Text 33. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. So Devahuti retained her original beauty, and as usual, she had white, beautiful teeth. So even now we see that somebody has got some nice, very nice, beautiful teeth. They look very attractive. And generally, this word lotus, as we see here, her face is compared to, her eyes are compared to the beauty of lotus buds. Now, lotus is supposed to be the best of the flowers in every respect, in its form, in its fragrance, etc. So, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead and also the pure devotees of the Lord who are Bhagavatas, the word lotus is used there. We don't say, like in our case, we might say our face, our feet, etc. But in their case, we address them as having a lotus face, lotus mouth, lotus feet, etc. So the word lotus is added for the Lord and great personalities. Text number 34. When she thought of her husband, the best of the sages, Kardamuni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all the maidservants, at once appeared where he was. So she was also a great yogi, and Kardamuni was also a great yogi and a great devotee of the Lord also. So as soon as she thought of Kardamuni, immediately Kardamuni appeared in front of them, and in front of them, and she had all the maidservants around her. So this is the point, is that a perfect yogi can fulfill all of one's desires. So this is an important point in this particular text number 35. She was amazed to find herself surrounded by 1,000 maids in the presence of her husband and to witness his yogic power. So Kardamuni, Devahuti was in fact very much surprised to see how everything happened due to her husband being a perfect yogi. She desired, and Kardamuni appeared in front of her, and she had thousands of servants around her. So she could understand that Kardamuni was not a normal person, but he was a perfect yogi also. Text number 36 and 37 together. Translation. The sage could see that Devahuti had washed herself clean and was shining forth as though no longer his former wife. She had regained her own original beauty as the daughter of a prince. Dressed in excellent robes, her charming breast duly girded, she was waited upon by 1,000 Gandharva girls. O destroyer of the enemy, his fondness for her grew, and he placed her on the aerial mansion. So here we see that Devahuti retained her original body, which she had when she came first to see him before her marriage. She was very, very beautiful. So after this bathing in the Bindu Sarovar, which is also created by the Supreme Lord himself, she regained her original complete beauty as she had before. And then, of course, mentioned that how she was dressed in nice robes, and she had a charming breast, and she was accompanied by 1,000 Gandharva girls. So here there is a point that she was earlier living in a cottage. After her marriage, she was living in a cottage, and her royal beauty also disappeared. She was living like an ordinary maidservant. But after being bathed by these Gandharva girls, by the order of Kardamuni's yogic power, she regained her beauty to such an extent that she got her original beauty, and this beauty attracted Kardamuni, that they wanted to have union. So a proper environment had to be created for that. So Srila Shankaracharya also has warned that those who are transcendentalists, that one who is after transcendental realization, should not be attracted by the breasts of a woman, because they are nothing but an interaction of fat and blood within the body. The point is that we see many times women exhibit their, of course, in the exterior Vedic system, women used to conceal their top of the body, including their head, they used to cover. But now with the Kali Yuga progressing, women tend to expose their particular, the body, particularly the top of the body, expose their breast, which there is a tendency for men to get carried away by their beauty. But in the purport also it is mentioned that it is nothing but a combination of fat and blood within the body. Text number 38. Though seemingly attached to his beloved consort, while served by the Gandharva girls, the sage did not lose his glory, which was mastery over his self. In the aerial mention, Kardamuni with his consort shone as charmingly as the moon in the midst of the stars in the sky, which causes rows of lilies to open in ponds at night. So, the beauty of her was she was so beautiful, but still Kardamuni did not lose his glories. She was looking very beautiful, but at the same time, Kardamuni, because he was a great yogi and also a devotee of the Lord, he did not lose his glories or did not fall for her out of lusty desire. But this arrangement is being made so that they can create progeny as instructed by Lord Brahma himself. So the description is given that in that aerial mention, Kardamuni with his beautiful wife and the damsels, they appeared like moon and the stars. Kardamuni appeared like moon, and the rest of them appeared like stars on a full moon night. Normally, on a full moon night, everything looks very, very beautiful. So the description is given that Kardamuni and Devahuti and all the stars, maids around, look like moon with surrounded by nice, beautiful stars. Number 39. In that aerial mansion, he traveled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru, which were rendered all the more beautiful by cool, gentle, fragrant breezes that stimulated passion. In these valleys, the treasure of the gods, Kuvera, surrounded by beautiful women and praised by the Siddhas, generally enjoys pleasure. Kardamuni, also surrounded by the beautiful damsels and his wife, went there and enjoyed for many, many years. So it is mentioned as to how Kardamuni and Devahuti and all the maids, they traveled in this aerial mansion. They would travel to many, many beautiful places like Mount Meru. Now, here there is a mention as to how there are 10 directions, north, west, east, west, northeast, south, northwest, and so forth, top, bottom. So these 10 directions are predominated or by demigods, who are each one demigod who is in charge of the each direction. Kardamuni traveled to all these directions to places where normally even demigods go. So demigods normally they travel, even they have certain restrictions in travel. But Kardamuni traveled to such places which were very, very beautiful. And Kuvera, also, who is the treasurer of the demigods, he travels to these places with nice, beautiful women and all these things. So Kardamuni is surrounded by these beautiful damsels, and his wife went there and they enjoyed for many, many years. Now here, his sex indulgence was praised by many, many siddhas, beings, because who have attained perfection, because it was intended for the good progeny, for the management of the universal affairs. So, though Kardamuni wanted to have union with his wife, It was not a lusty desire, but it was even appreciated by great higher denizens of heavenly planets. So, because it was for the purpose of creating progeny for the management of universal affairs. So, there is a mention that Kardamuni and Devahuti were perfect grihasthas who were an example for the society. Not only that, and Krishna gave Kardamuni and Devahuti all the opulences because they were not attached. Externally, it looks like Kardamuni was enjoying all the opulence that was there, but it is said that internally he was, in fact, totally detached. But the modern life cycle, age of life cycle is that they promote sex desire in the form of lusty desires because sex life is something that binds one in this material world. So without Krishna in the center, one is bound, and that is the root cause of failure of marriages and resulting in abortion, divorce, etc., which we see is increasing on a day-to-day basis in the modern society. But in the earlier days, the marriage was not based on lusty desires, but they all lived together because that is how their life was based on with Krishna in the center. Text number 40. Satisfied by his wife, he enjoyed that aerial mansion not only on Mount Meru, but in different gardens known as Vishrambaka, Surasana, Nandana, Pushpabhadraka, and Chaitratya, and by the Manasara Sarora lake. So he traveled to so many planets, and it is mentioned how just as air passes uncontrolled, we cannot control the movement of air. So just as air passes uncontrolled in every direction, similarly Kardamuni traveled to all the various planets without any restriction. And in that way, he flew in his airplane at his own will. He even surpassed even the demigods. Normally, demigods fly in they have a arrangement for interplanetary travel, but it is not unrestricted. They also have some restrictions. But Kardamuni surpassed even the demigods, and he could travel even where the demigods would not travel. Text number 42. Transition. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. So from here onward, we start with some important slokas. Now, Kardamuni was a great devotee of the Lord. So he had taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. That is why it is mentioned here that what is difficult for normally common men to achieve, devotees of the Lord, they can easily achieve because they have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So the Lord's lotus feet are like source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. As you all may be knowing, Ganges river flows from the heavenly planets down to the earth, and it is the pastime is that Lord Vamanadev pierced one of his toes into the covering, universal covering, and through that the Ganges water flows. So the Ganges water is touched by the lotus feet of the Lord, and that is why it is very auspicious. Not only that, Kardamuni's mind was always absorbed in Krishna. More than a yogi, he was a great devotee of the Lord also. So though externally it looked like he was trying to enjoy his life with Devavati, but internally he was completely detached from her. Similarly, she was also totally detached. Though he had a lot of mystic power, he did not get carried away by this mystic power. He did not, in fact, it is said that the Varnasrama system is meant for development of this detachment from this material world. The point is that when we take birth in this material world, there is a tendency in us to develop a lot of attachment to our kith and kin, the property, everything, etc. Whatever opulence we have, there's a tendency to get attached. So we get bound in this material world. But for a devotee like Kardamuni, who has taken shelter of Krishna, nothing is difficult to achieve. So another example that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam is about King Priyavrata. He ruled the universe for 11 millions of years or something like that. It said 11 arbudas. Each arbuda is millions of years. So his example is also nice because when he was always determined to fix his arrow upon a bowstring, and all the opponents of religious life would flee just by seeing him. He was so great brave, and he was a great devotee also, apart from being a great king. And he had a nice, beautiful wife called Barhishmati. And by her feminine dress and by the behavior and the way she would dress, walk, smile, etc., Barhishmati actually increased King Priyavrata's energy also. So though it looked externally, but that he was attracted by his wife, he was a very, very great soul. It looked like he might have lost himself in the feminine conduct of his wife, but he behaved with her internally just like an ordinary man, and because he was a very great soul. So it is said that one needs to be very careful when one engages with his wife or women. So in Varnashrama system, there are some restrictions in terms of movement between men and women. It is, like the way it is going on today, it is not so. So generally, there are restrictions between of common association between men and women. But King Priyavrata was such great that he executed his governmental duties very properly, and at the right time, many would in fact think that he was behaving like an henpecked husband, and he has lost his sense of responsibility. But however, he was fully conscious of his position as a spirit soul, and he behaved like a karmi husband externally. He ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years, and at the right time, when he felt that he should leave, uh, he left all the opulence, and he left his wife also. The point is that he was also very, very detached. This is the example or lesson that one must learn. One should not become bound or become attached to the opulence that one gets. Devotees are not deprived of opulence because Krishna also knows that by giving opulence to the devotees, devotees don't become attached to it. So Priyavrata was also a perfect example, and he renounced everything at the right point of time. So it is said that by the grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead, he had many obedient sons who were also great devotees of the Lord. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he enjoyed. He had so much of sense gratification and his great and opulent kingdom, and he renounced all the attachment in no time. So his heart was completely clean. It became a place of pastime for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he returned back to the spiritual world uh, to have his pastimes with Krishna, and he retained his original position by the mercy of his spiritual master in the form of Narad Muni. So this is how he was set an example to the whole world, how one can return to the spiritual world by renouncing everything. So then we come back to the sloka here, text number 43. The conclusion of this particular 42nd sloka is that one who takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can achieve all mystic powers also. But devotees don't exhibit those powers because they are not normally used to exhibiting their opulence or these things to other outsiders. They are always detached from these. Text number 43. After showing his wife the globe of the universe and its different arrangements, full of many wonders, the great yogi Kardamuni returned to his own hermitage. So Kardamuni, in fact, took Devahuti all around, and after that, he returned back to his hermitage. In the purport, there is mention of how each and every planet are differently made, and they all have different features. And all these were personally experienced by Kardamuni when he traveled with his wife. And in spite of seeing such opulent places and nice opulences everywhere in the heavenly planets, in fact, heavenly planets have a lot of opulences by which even the demigods carried away. But Kardamuni was so humble that though he was living, he saw all those opulences. He came back to his hermitage because he had the power to be humble and be detached from it also. So we can understand from example of Kardamuni that even though he had a lot of mystic power, he remained still as a devotee of the Lord. That is the real position of every living entity. Normally, if we see in today's material world also, we see that somebody is very, very rich and opulent, they will not take to devotional service at all. They, in fact, they would be very, very reluctant because they feel that they've got everything. Why should we come to God? But by nature, by our constitutional position, each and every living entity is meant to be a servant of the Lord. So the Lord sometimes gives opulences to devotees, but devotees don't get carried away. But materialistic people, they start thinking why to think of God. So Kardamuni is a perfect example. Though he went to so many nice, beautiful, opulent places, he came back to his own hermitage. Another example that is given in the purport is about Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni also traveled a lot in space. But still, in spite of all these facts, all these acts of devotees of the Lord, they don't consider themselves to be great yogis. They don't consult with, they are not proud of this opulence that they have. So by the example of Kardamuni, we see that in spite of his mystic power, he still continued to remain as a great devotee of the Lord. That is a real position of any living entity. Text 44. We will recite the sloka, some important slokas from here. Vipajya navadaatmanham manavim suratotsukham ramam niramayan reme varshapugan muhurtavat. Translation. After coming back to his hermitage, he divided himself into 9 personalities just to give pleasure to Devahuti, the daughter of Manu, who was eager for sex life. In that way, he enjoyed with her for many, many years, which passed just like a moment. So here it is mentioned, the purport, how Kardamuni actually divided, after seeing all the opulent places and opulence in all these places, Kardamuni then wanted to satisfy the sexual desire of Devahuti. So Kardamuni expanded himself into 9 forms. So instead of 1, he became 9, and 9 persons had sexual union with Devahuti for many, many years. So it is given, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that it is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. So that is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, there was no reason for Kardamuni to expand himself into 9. So this is another example of Kardamuni's nice, great yogic power. So as the Supreme Personality of God can expand himself in millions of forms, a yogi can expand himself up to 9 forms, but not more than that. So a great yogi can expand into 9 forms, but another example that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam is about Saubhari Muni. He expanded himself into 8 forms. But Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can expand into millions of forms, as we see in his Raslila pastimes. He expanded into so many millions of forms. So no one can compare himself to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any conceivable energetic manifestation of power. So the power that a yogi has is very, very limited, whereas the Supreme Lord has unlimited power. Text number 45. In that aerial mansion, Devahuti, in the company of her handsome husband, situated on an excellent bed that increased sexual desires, could not realize how time was passing. So they both engaged in sex indulgence in union, and it is mentioned as to how they enjoy it. When they were engaging in this union, the time passed so much that they did not realize how time is passing. So in the purport, it is mentioned that anyone who is engaged in union with the opposite sex, time passes in a way that nobody can realize that it is passing. But the same thing, when we try and in spiritual activities, many times people feel, when will the class end? When will this program end? So this is how the difference between time when it passes in satisfaction of one's personal desires and time when it is used for mm, religious activities. But a devotee of the Lord always decides to hear for long. He wants to speak for long. He wants to do kirtan for a long time because that is the realization of a devotee. Text number 46. While the couple who eagerly longed for sexual pleasure were thus enjoying themselves by virtue of mystic powers, 100 autumns passed like a brief span of time. So just now, as I mentioned, the time was passing in such a way that they did not realize. In this sloka, it is mentioned that 100 autumns passed like a very small moment of time. Text number 47. The powerful Kardam Muni was the knower of everyone's heart, and he could grant whatever one desired. Knowing the spiritual soul, he regarded her as half of his body. Dividing himself into 9 forms, he impregnated Devahuti with 9 discharges of semen. So Kardamuni divided himself into 9 forms, and then he discharged semen into 9 times. He discharged his semen into Devahuti, and it is said that thereafter 9 daughters were born in the womb of Devahuti. Text number 48. Immediately afterward, on the same date, Devahuti gave birth to 9 female children, all charming in every limb and fragrant with the scent of the red lotus flower. Devahuti gave birth to 9 female children, and each and everyone was very, very attractive, and all were beautiful. And also in the Smriti Shastra, it is mentioned that, as well as in Ayurveda, that when the discharge of a male is greater, male children are begotten. But when the discharge of female is greater, female children are begotten. So it looks like from this explanation that Devahuti was much more sexually excited, and therefore she had 9 daughters at once. And all the daughters were very, very beautiful, and they have nice bodies nicely formed. And each resembled a lotus flower and was fragrant like a lotus, which I explained at the beginning of the class. Text number 49. Patim sa pravarjisyantam tada lakshoshati bhahihi smayamana viklavena vidayena viduyata. Translation. When she saw her husband about to leave home, she smiled externally, but at heart she was agitated and distressed. So as soon as the 9 daughters were born, Kardamuni was prepared to leave home. So this is an example of how in the Vedic system, people were not attached to their family, kith and kin and all. At the right time, the system of in the Varnashrama system, we find Vanaprastha. This Vanaprastha is a stage where when the son gets married, immediately the father leaves home to lead this Vanaprastha life. And the husband and wife would, if the wife accompanies the husband for some time in the Vanaprastha stage, she would come back after some time because she would then be in the home because she cannot be staying in the forest. And the husband would take Vanaprastha and then thereafter take the next stage, that is sannyasa. So the example of Kardamuni is perfect in a way that one who is concerned about Krishna consciousness in his life, he will never get entrapped into household life. And he is ready to leave household entanglement as soon as possible. In the sense that he knows that once one gets family, children, etc., one becomes bound by the attraction of these children. So even we see today, these days, that when children are born in the house, the parents get a lot of attachment to them, the way the children speak, the way the children play, all those things, the parents get attracted. And over a period of time, they develop a lot of attachment. Of course, the attachment these days also are very, very artificial. So we don't see that much of real interest for the children, because children are also exposed to the outside society these days, by which what happens is that they are also materially contaminated. Text 50. Translation. She stood and scratched the ground with her foot, which was radiant with the luster of her gem-like nails. Her head bent down. She spoke in slow yet charming accents, suppressing her tears. So when Kardamuni was about to leave, she stood there and scratched the ground with her foot, and her head was bent down, and she spoke in a very slow and yet charming accent, just suppressing. She somehow artificially suppressed her tears. So it is said that when a woman scratches the ground with her foot, it is a sign that her mind is very, very disturbed. So Devahuti's mind was very disturbed when Kardamuni was leaving, and the reasons are explained in the next few slokas. So these signs were also exhibited by the gopis before Krishna. When the gopis came in the late of the night and performed the pastimes of Ras Leela with Krishna, at one point of time, Krishna asked them to return to their home. So immediately, the gopis scratched the ground just as if their minds were disturbed. Text number 51. Devahutir uvacha sarvam tad bhagavan mahyam upovaha patishrutam athapi me prapannaya abhayam datum arhachi. See, Devahuti said, translation Srila Prabhupada said, see, Devahuti said, my Lord, you have fulfilled all the promises you gave me. Yet because I am your surrendered soul, you should give me fearlessness too. So Devahuti now tells Kardamuni that you have fulfilled all the promises that you had made to me in terms of having progeny. But now I need fearlessness, want you to give me fearlessness. Now, how one gets fearlessness is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam also. This material world is nothing but the whole material world is built out of nothing but fear. At every point of time, right from a time that a child is born, fear is inbuilt in us. And whether we go out or we are at home, so many calamities happen in this material world. It is said that the whole world is created and fire takes place in no point of time, just like rubbing of two bamboo sticks in the forest. In the forest, two bamboo sticks rub each other and a fire is ignited. Similarly, material world is built up full of calamities in such a way that in no time any calamity can occur. So we always have that fear of death, fear of falling sick, fear of old age. All these are fear of injury. So we always have fear in us. And Devahuti is asking Kardamuni to grant him fearlessness, how she can be free from the cycle of death, and that he is a spiritual master. Devahuti treats Kardamuni not only as a husband, but also as a spiritual master. So this is how generally in the Vedic system, the women would respect their husband as good as a spiritual master. And husband would give spiritual instructions to his wife for her also to have self-realization. So Devahuti is asking Kardamuni to give this fearlessness so that she can be delivered from the cycle of birth and death. So in this purport, there is a very nice quote given by Srila Prabhupada. To take charge of someone, therefore, either as a father, mother, spiritual master, relative or husband, one must accept the responsibility to give his ward freedom from the fearful situation of material existence. So this material existence is nothing but fear. So in this reference, there is a nice quote that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Rishabdev instructs his sons. The sloka is from 5th Canto, 5th chapter, 18th sloka. The sloka goes like this: Gurur nasasyat, swachano nasasyat, Pita nasasyad, janane nasasyad, daivana tatsyan, na patichasasyan, na mochayed yam samupeta martyum. The translation is, one who cannot deliver his dependents from this path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a mother, a husband, or a worshipable demigod. It is a very important sloka which is given as a reference. I'll repeat it again. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the repeated cycle of birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, mother, husband, or a worshipable demigod. In other words, when we go for progeny, or when a spiritual master accepts a disciple, they should accept the position of a father, mother, or a husband, or a worshipable demigod, only if they can assure that their dependents are freed from the cycle of birth and death. That means the spiritual master should ensure that his disciples don't come back to this material world and enter the cycle of birth and death. Similarly, it is also the responsibility of a father and mother, or even a husband, or even a demigod, to ensure that their descendants or their dependents don't get entangled into this material world in the cycle of birth and death. How that can happen? That is by making them devotees of the Lord. That is why in the yesteryears, it always used to be said that a family is complete when they have a son, because the son can offer oblations, and by which they are not entangled in this material world. So nowadays, of course, that belief is gone. But generally, all of our dependents should be delivered from the cycle of birth and death. And that can happen only when one becomes devotee of the Lord. When one becomes devotee of the Lord, then automatically the descendants or dependents are also helped in becoming, they also get the help in making devotees of the Lord. So Devahuti is now she says she's letting Kardamuni leave. She doesn't have any regrets on Kardamuni leaving. But then she says that you have fulfilled all my desires, but give me freedom from fearfulness, as material existence means only fear. And she wants to become free from this fear. Text number 52. Brahman duhitribistubhyam vimgrya patayas samaha kaschit syanne vishokaya vai pravarajite vanam. Translation Srila Prabhupada. She says, my dear Brahmana, as far as your daughters are concerned, they will find their own suitable husbands and go away to their respective homes. But who will give me solace after your departure as a sannyasi? So here some very nice important points are there. She says that as far as the daughters are concerned, they will get married and they will go away. But who is there to take care of her? And the purport, there's a very nice mention that it is said that a father himself becomes the son in another form. That means a father, when a mother gives birth to a son, that son is a representation of the father. So in other words, the father and son are considered to be non-different. So many times a widow who has her son is actually not a widow because she has a representative in the form of a son, and he is none other than the representative of her own husband. Similarly, Devahuti is indirectly asking Kardama Muni to leave a representative so that in his absence, she might be relieved of her material anxieties by a suitable son. So she is asking Kardama Muni to leave behind a son who will give her spiritual instructions and relieve her of all the anxieties that she may have if he would have been alone. So it is said that a householder is not expected to remain at home for all his days. That means after his, once children are born, the husband is meant to leave home and take the Manaprastha stage. So after he's getting his sons and daughters married, a householder can retire from household life, leaving his wife in charge of the grown-up sons, which I mentioned earlier. That is the convention of the Vedic system. So Devahuti is indirectly asking that in his absence from home, there be at least one male child to give her relief from her anxieties. So this relief means what she is asking is spiritual instructions. So relief does not mean material relief from material discomforts. Material comforts will end at the end of the body. Whatever opulence we have, it is all bound to come to an end. But spiritual instruction will not end. It will go on with the spirit soul. So instruction in spiritual advancement is necessary, but without having a worthy son, how could Devahuti advance in spiritual knowledge? So, though Kardamuni was a great devotee of the Lord, Devahuti now realizes that once Kardamuni leaves, she needs somebody who can guide her spiritually, and that could be a son who can give her spiritual instructions. Also, there is another important point that is mentioned, that it is the duty of the husband to liquidate his debt to his wife. The wife gives her husband sincere service, and he becomes indebted to her, because one cannot accept service from his subordinate without giving something in exchange. This is a very important point. Now, the wife serves her husband very faithfully, loyally, and she renders a lot of service. But the husband cannot just take the service, he has to liquidate his debt, this debt to his wife also. Similarly, a spiritual master cannot accept service from a disciple without awarding him some spiritual instruction. So, this is a mutual reciprocation of love and duty. So, Devahuti here is reminding Kardamuni that she has rendered him a lot of faithful service. And even after considering the situation on the basis of liquidating his debt towards his wife, she says that he must give a male child before he leaves. Indirectly, Devahuti requests her husband to remain at home a few more days, or at least till a male child is born. So a male child can give this. The system was that in the earlier years, the male child was also spiritually advanced. The daughters would go get married away and go to their respective in-laws' homes, but a son remains always at home, and he is an asset by giving spiritual instructions to his mother. So Devahuti is asking Kardamuni that he stay there for a few more days until at least a male child is born. So similarly, a spiritual master, when he takes service from his disciples, he has to give spiritual instruction. That is what is called the reciprocation of love and duty. Text number 53. एतावतालं कालेन गतिक्रान्तेन मे प्रभो इन्द्रियार्थ प्रसंगेन परित्यक्त परात्मनः. Translation Prabhupada ki jai. Until now, we have simply wasted so much of our time in sense gratification, neglecting to cultivate knowledge of the Supreme Lord. So here also there are some very nice important points. In the purport there is mentioned, Devahuti is telling her husband, so far we have these daughters and we have enjoyed material life in the aerial mansion, traveling all over the universe and etc. These boons have come by your grace. So she is appreciating Kardamuni, that she has traveled all over the universe by the grace of Kardamuni, and now they have had enjoyed their life with their daughters also, and they have all been for sense gratification. And now there must be something for spiritual advancement. So here she mentions that the daughters have come and gone. That means they have lived for sense gratification. Until that stage, there is no mention of spiritual instruction. That means she has not received any spiritual instructions from her daughters. Because those days, in the years, the daughters would get married at a very early age and then they would leave their home and go. In fact, the system was they would get engaged when they were 4 or 5 years to the boy whom they would be getting married. And by 10, 11, 12, 13, they would leave their homes. So daughters would stay in the house for a very short time. So that is why it is said that they have been source of sense gratification for both Kardamuni and Devahuti. But now she looks for something like for spiritual advancement. And this human life is meant for spiritual enjoyment only. And so far, they have enjoyed lives with daughters who will go away. Text number 54. Indriyateshu sanchantya prasangastvai me kritah ajanantya param bhavam tatapi astu avayaya me. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Not knowing your transcendental situation, I have loved you while remaining attached to the objects of the senses. Nonetheless, that the affinity I have developed for you rid me of all fear. Another very important sloka. Devahuti feels that she lamenting actually because her husband had given her so much of material enjoyment, but she did not know that he was so advanced in spiritual realization. Muni, as I mentioned before, was not only a great yogi who knew how to fulfill her desires, but he was also a great devotee of the Lord. But on her part, she did not realize his supreme position as a spiritual personality. So now she is lamenting that all these years that she has spent with him have gone in material enjoyment only or sense gratification. So now her plea is that she did not know the glories of her great husband because she had taken shelter of him. Now she wants to be delivered from material entanglement. So as a woman, as an ordinary wife, Devahuti became attached to Kardamuni in order to satisfy her sense enjoyment and other material necessities. But actually she associated with a very great personality. She did not realize that Kardamuni was a great devotee of the Lord. But as he was leaving, she realized that all through she has spent time with him for sense gratification. But he being a greater devotee of the Lord, she realized that she was feeling separation from him. Not as a husband, but being a great devotee of the Lord because of his spiritual position. Now she understood this and she wanted to utilize the advantage of the association of her great husband. So now she realized Kardamuni's supreme position and wanted to make use of his association. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Srila Prabhupada actually gives a reference of a sloka from Chaitanya Charitamrita, which says the root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. The point is that devotional service to Krishna cannot be practiced without association of advanced devotees. Right from the time that one begins his journey in the path of spiritual life, one needs association of devotees. One comes to devotional service only through the association of devotees, and one has to remain in the association of devotees to sustain their spiritual life. And this has to be there even until one gives up the body. Because even at the end of one's life, one will require the association of devotees only. So that is how association of devotees is very, very important and essential. Text number 55. Sangoya samsmriter hetur asatsu vihitodhya sa eva sadhushu krito nisangatvai kalpate. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Association for sense gratification is certainly the path of bondage, but the same type of association performed with a saintly person leads to the path of liberation, even if performed without knowledge. So another very important sloka. So when one associates with materialistic person, association is very, very important in everyone's life. In the normal course, people work outside, uh, work very hard for 5 days or 6 days in a week, and then they want to relieve themselves of the stress that they have during their work time. So they want to go to clubs or social organizations to relieve of that stress. And they want, by constitution, we cannot uh, be remaining alone. We always look for association. So the two types of association that is mentioned here are association with a great saintly person results in liberation, just as whether one goes towards fire knowingly or unknowingly, the fire will make one warm. So whether knowingly or unknowingly we go near the fire makes us warm. Similarly, association with a great saintly persons results in liberation. Devahuti expressed her gratefulness, for although she wanted to associate with Kardamuni only for sense gratification, but he was spiritually so advanced that she was sure to be liberated by his benediction. So Kardamuni, Devahuti thought that she had spent so many years of her life with Kardamuni in sense gratification. But now that Kardamuni is planning to leave, she realized the supremacy of Kardamuni as a very great devotee of the Lord. And she realized that he was spiritually so great that he could liberate her by his benediction. Devahuti feels repentant for not associating with Kardamuni due to by his supreme position. She says that she could have been delivered rather than spend time in sense gratification. So, as I mentioned in the previous sloka also, when we spend time in sense gratification, we don't realize how time is passing, but time flies very fast. But the same time, when we try to pass in spiritual activities, we feel the time is not passing. This is how time affects. So Devahuti feels that she spent all her time in sense gratification, and now she wants to associate with him for spiritual perfection. Text number 56. Nehaya karma dharmaya na viragaya kalpate na tirtha padasevayai jivan apipito hisaha. Anyone whose work is not meant to elevate him to religious life, anyone whose religious ritualistic performances do not raise him to renunciation, and anyone situated in renunciation does not lead him to devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead must be considered dead, although he is breathing. In this purport, there are a lot of very important points, so we'll just go through it in detail. It is mentioned that when one performs work, that means we perform work, that karma should lead us to religious life. Otherwise, it is as good as dead. The karma has no meaning. It only binds us in this material world. So when we perform activity, which is called karma, that karma should lead us to religious life. How it leads to religious life is the starting process is yoga. That is karma yoga. Karma yoga is why Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, one should offer, one has his right, one has got his duty, right to perform his duty, but one does not have a right to claim the results for the performance of his duty. That means we have a duty to perform, for which there is no exemption, but we don't have a right to look for results in that duty. So that karma, what we do, by offering the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we establish that process is called karma yoga. That karma should ultimately one day lead us to religious life. Purpose of human life is to understand what is religion. The purpose of human life is to understand, the goal of life is to understand what we are, who we are, what is. There's a difference between human life and animal life. Animal life, they don't have the capacity or the intelligence to understand what is self-realization. So they live like animals, they die like animals, and they go through a long cycle. And ultimately, after a long cycle of going through births in so many species of life, one comes to the stage of getting a human form of life. That human form of life is meant for self-realization. And that self-realization means, who am I? What am I? What is the goal of life? I am a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. That is not this material body, but the soul within me is a small part and parcel of the Supreme Spark. And just as our hand, our legs are meant to serve the whole body, similarly, that soul within us is meant to serve the Supreme Soul. That is the constitutional position of the soul within us. And how it can be achieved is by using this material body in the service of the Lord. That is what is called self-realization. So that is why it is mentioned here that by performing one's karma, it should lead one to religious life. And that performance of religious activities should lead to renunciation. That means by performing religious activity, why we perform religious activities? Because we should reach a stage of renunciation. Renunciation means not that I give up everything, but we don't develop attachment. Now, Kardamuni and Devahuti are themselves a perfect example of a grihastha. I mentioned they had so much of opulence, but still at the right time they are prepared to give up. Kardamuni was prepared to give his opulence as soon as his daughters were born. And Devahuti also, when Kardamuni was about to leave, she was not attached to him. In fact, she said that you may leave now, but give me fearlessness in the form of spiritual instructions. So this is what is renunciation. Renunciation does not give up, but renunciation means using everything in the service of the Lord. So as long as we use all our material opulences in the service of the Lord, we can utilize, we can be situated in our place wherever we are. For example, we may, these days, like I mentioned, Vanaprastha, sannyasi stage. Sannyasi is not recommended in Kali Yuga. And Vanaprastha stage has also virtually become extinct. But one can be placed in his grihastha and still practice what is mentioned here. I'll complete this first. So one's karma should lead to one's religious life. That religious life, by performing religious activities, should lead to renunciation. And ultimately, the renunciation should lead one to devotional service. So we may say that I'm renouncing everything, but ultimately, if they are not used in devotional service to the Lord, then it's a simply waste of time, energy, and resources. And in the translation, it says that if this is not achieved, then one is bound in the material world, and that karma is a waste of time, which I mentioned. So the point is that all our karma should really lead to religious practices. Religious practices should lead to renunciation. And renunciation should ultimately lead us to devotional service. Ultimately, it is only the devotional service that will free us from this bondage in this material world. Otherwise, whatever we have done throughout the life, if you look at right from the time that we have taken birth, we have gone through, we have studied in school, we have gone to college. Nowadays, men, women both go through the same cycle. After that, they get married, they have children. Generally, all this has been taken as a process of sense gratification. In the process, we don't understand how time has passed. But like, for example, people like me, we know how difficult it has been that going through all these cycles. And at the end of life, if I have to come back again into this material world and go through the same cycle of going to the school, going to the college, getting married again, have children, and so forth, it's a hard struggle. So devotional service is the only way which can free a human being from the cycle of birth and death. And by practicing this devotional service in a way that one can be relieved at the end of this life itself and go back to the spiritual world, which is our constitutional position. We were there originally serving the Lord. We have to go back there only. Otherwise, as long as we are there in this material world, we will be bound, and this karma, whatever we do, is nothing but a waste of time, waste of energy, and waste of all the resources. So that is how one after the other, each one work should result into devotional service. And devotional service in Krishna consciousness can be performed until our lifetime, or end of our life also. Text number 57 is the last sloka. I'll read the sloka. Saham bhagavatodnunam vanchita maya dridham yatvam vimuktitam prapya namumuksheya bandhanar. Translation Srila Prabhupada. It says, my Lord, surely I have been solidly cheated by the insurmountable illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For in spite of having obtained your association which gives liberation from material bondage, I did not seek such liberation. Again, the concluding sloka is very important. I'll read it again. My Lord, surely I have been solidly cheated by the insurmountable illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For in spite of having obtained your association, which gives liberation from material bondage, I did not seek such liberation. So the purport is mentioned that an intelligent man should utilize good opportunity. And the first opportunity in human form of life is the human form of life. And the second opportunity is to take birth in a suitable family where one can cultivate spiritual knowledge. So here, Devahuti feels that she has been cheated by the illusory form or Maya energy of the Lord. Why she feels that she has been cheated by the illusory energy of the Lord? She feels that though Kardamuni was present with her as her husband, she utilized all her time for sense gratification. And now that he's planning to leave, she feels that she did not make use of his association, which gives liberation from material bondage. And I'm so unfortunate. I'm so this thing that I did not seek such a liberation from you before itself. So here in the purport, Prabhupada makes two important points. He says that intelligent man is one. He uses good opportunities. The first opportunity is that he's got a human form of life. And the second opportunity is that to take birth in such a suitable family where he can cultivate spiritual knowledge. And this can happen by association with a saintly person. That means We see today many have got human form of life, but there are many who don't take up the spiritual life. So it is very necessary that one takes birth in a good spiritual family background so that they can cultivate spiritual knowledge. Because otherwise, when one takes birth in any material family, it is very difficult to practice devotional service, and it's a very difficult process also. So it is fortunate enough, one should be fortunate enough to get birth in not only in a human form of life, but to get birth in a good family for cultivation of spiritual knowledge is also very, very rare. So Devati was very conscious that she was born as a daughter of an emperor. She was sufficiently educated and cultured, and at last she got Kardamuni as a saintly person and a great yogi as her husband. But still, she did not get liberation from the entanglement of material energy. So therefore, she feels cheated by the illusory energy of the Lord. So the point is that Devavati was also from a very high parentage. She had a lot of opulence. She married a great husband, yogi, great devotee of the Lord. But still she felt that she was cheated by Maya. And therefore, here it says that the illusory metallurgy energy is cheating everyone. People do not know what they are doing when they worship the material energy in the form of goddess Kali or Durga for material bones. So generally, common man worships Durga or Kali and all for material opulence. They say, "Mother, give me this, give me that." But such devotees of Maya or Durga, they do not know that they are being cheated by goddess Maya or Durga. So material achievement is actually no achievement, because as soon as one is illusioned by material gifts, he becomes more and more entangled, and there's no question of liberation. So material achievement is such that it is going to come to an end at the end of our life. But if one does not develop detachment, then what happens is that he becomes bound in this material world. One should be intelligent enough to understand how to utilize material as such for the purpose of spiritual realization. And that is called karma yoga or jnana yoga. So whatever material assets one has, one should know how to utilize them for spiritual advancement. And that is what is called karma yoga or jnana yoga. They all should be utilized in the service of the Lord, as explained by Lord in Bhagavad Gita. One should try to worship the Lord with all the assets that one has got. There are many forms of service to the Lord, and anyone can render service unto Him to the best of his ability. So we all have opulences, somewhere or other, something or other, we all have in terms of a good family, educational background, or spiritual association. But the ultimate point is that if we don't fail to utilize this association, that we get an opportunity, then our whole time has been wasted, and we'll become bound by attachment of this material opulence, and we'll be entangled in this material world. So the example of Devahuti is given in such a nice way that she feels that she has not made use of the association of her husband, Kardamuni. So the next chapter will explain how Kardamuni takes renunciation, and that will be spoken by the next speaker. With this, I conclude the class for the day. For the next couple of minutes, I can take some questions, some comments if anybody has one.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, Mataji.
Prabhuji, during the course, you mentioned that Kadamba Muni expanded himself 9 more times. And Dehuti, you said that the women were 9 more times lustier than the men.
Yes.
But usually, I mean, in our lives, we see, I mean, I can't refute what is written in Bhagavatam. The women are more submissive. The women are more God-fearing. The women are more like they do the duties toward the men, and they follow the dharma ashram more than the men. And it is all the heinous crimes are done more by the men mostly for sexual activities.
Correct.
Yeah. Then how is the woman more lustier than the man is?
Okay, if you see whatever you see in the external world today, this change has happened in the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, even like I have seen even in my childhood days, my mother used to stay at home, and she was very faithful in rendering service to my father. So whatever we see today, the electronic media, people getting qualified, it has all happened in the last few 20, 30 years, not before that. Otherwise, earlier, the Vedic system was that the mother would always be at home, father would go to work, and she would serve her husband. Husband's duty is to be a devotee of the Lord. And then he shares this opulence with his wife. His wife automatically shares whatever advancement, materially or spiritually, husband has got. This is how the Vedic system was. Now, I don't know whether you have experienced this system or you are just seeing what is there now. Yes, definitely, if you see today, crime against women is taking place and they're mostly by men only. But uh, as per Shastras, women were more sexually attracted to men. And men actually would be, it was earlier easy for men to take up the process of self-realization. Women being always at home, they used to have attachment to children. But what has happened is that in the last couple of years, with the education and advancement of material education, all these values have been lost. Unfortunately, even in our country. Otherwise, our foundation of our country was very, very strong. Women never used to go home. Women used to be always at home, taking care of children. In the process, they used to develop some attachment for children, men, husband, etc. Otherwise, men would be engaged often in their work, and it was also the woman's responsibility by taking care of her husband that he does not deviate from religious principles. So it is a question of both of them. But with the current educational system, even women have started working. Otherwise, some 20, 30 years before, there was no such crime. What is happening? All this has happened in the last couple of years. And that is because of the social media and educational system.
And Prabhuji, now when even in the other this thing, like when they sorry, like now in that last quotation, this thing, Dehuti is lamenting that she only got into sexual enjoyment and she did not take the right association from her husband.
Yes.
But Kadamavani himself is such a great rishi, and he knew that she's a lesbian. Why didn't he not impart the spiritual knowledge to her? Why he
So,
also been trapped? Like
so what is the question? What is the question?
Kadamavani did not,
give spiritual instruction.
Advice to Devati in the beginning. He could have done that, no problem. Like knowing that she comes from a princely family, knowing her background.
Okay. I'll explain. Yeah, I'll explain this also to you. In the Vedic system, husband would not stay at home for a very long time. They would marry, and as soon as they have children, the husband would leave home, and then the woman would be there along with her children. That used to be what is called Vanaprastha state, which is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna established this Varnasrama system so that we don't develop attachment to our kith and kin. And at the right time, we leave home, the husband leaves home, or husband and wife both leave home. Later, the wife returns back because she cannot live in a forest. So the purpose of this Vanaprastha stage is to develop detachment. And those who are still advanced can take sannyasi. But like I said, these things have gradually disappeared with the progress of Kali Yuga. So Kardamuni normally, as an ideal this thing, even he could give instruction. But a woman is one who needs that spiritual guidance not only from beginning, up to the end she needs in the form of support. That's why Srila Prabhupada always gives an states that a woman should always be protected because they are a weaker sex. That is why women tend to be, even today, women tend to be exploited. So that's why Srila Prabhupada always mentioned that women should always be protected initially by the parents until she gets married. After she gets married, she is protected by her husband. And once she has children, she is protected by her children. This is the Vedic system of living, particularly for women. It never said that women go to school or college or something like that and work in corporate environment like today. So women it is explained that women are in a sense a weaker sex. That is why men tend to exploit them, knowing this weakness. It is not that weakness means is a total weakness of the woman, but uh, physically also, if a man assaults a woman, she gets assaulted very easily. But when two men fight, they fight with each other. So that is why in all respects, it is said that women should be protected. So whatever instructions are there, husband gives to wife also, but thereafter it cannot stop. That association, like I mentioned, is something that starts from the birth itself. It has to go on till one leaves the body. It is not that one becomes a great devotee of the Lord and one can live without association. Even at the last moment, we need association when we leave the body. That is why a son is necessary, because he takes care of the mother.
Yes, Prabhu. Another thing when you mentioned, like if you cannot have devotee children or children who if you should not get married. But now,
Yes.
Prabhu, sometimes now see Prabhu, like okay, Prahlad heard it from Narad Muni, he became a great devotee.
Yes.
Prabhu, how that atmosphere may be very nice. When you are pregnant, like when the kids are pregnant, you must have heard a lot of things. But still, children do not take up to Casey. What do you do in that case? How do you become responsible? You give them, then you say it's karma. Everybody desires, when you get married, you desire to have a child.
Yes, as per Shastra, you may have a desire to have a child, but considering the situation, if you feel that today's society does not, first thing is we should have a proper association at home, even from the birth of the child. The child should be encouraged to cultivate spiritual knowledge. Even after the child is born, this discussion came up with me in the last week also when I was giving a class on Garbhadana Samskara. So the question is, the material Maya is so powerful today. Even though a child is born in the family of a devotee, the child's interest, spiritual interest, is not protected by putting them onto a material education outside, because that is what Maya is. Today, the material education is so advanced that even if a child is born in a spiritual atmosphere at home, the outside atmosphere is such that it does not let one easily gets carried away by the Maya potency of the Lord. So there are many implications for such children to balance the spiritual life when they are exposed to the outside world. So when I was discussing this point, they were mentioning about how somebody has opened a Gurukula like a thing where many children, I heard about 80 to 100 children are attending this Gurukula somewhere in the outskirts of Bangalore. It is also promoted by some of the devotees of the Lord himself. So such an atmosphere actually gives rise to the children in a proper atmosphere. And I've seen also these children, they are not exposed to the material world, nor do the parents give them mobile and internet and all those things. There are some good children. So we need to have a relook at the child's well-being, not only materially, but also spiritually. Now I heard about this facility. I was in fact very, very happy. And many who children are going there, they have seen the positive results in the children with not being exposed to the outside world. And if we bring children and we are not able to deliver them, it is we who take the responsibility of bringing them.
Yes, Prabhu, this topic is slightly, anyway.
I know it's very complicated, very difficult to digest.
Prabhu,
it's very difficult to digest, but that's the truth.
Even when we are into it, also we keep fighting Maya every day. We have to push ourselves, with everything going around. I mean, for the children nowadays, to get them into facing is one Herculean task. So I think.
I know. Maya is very powerful these days. So if you want to live without it, also it can be possible as long as you don't bring TV, internet at home. Things are possible. I've seen children growing up in this type of environment.
It's not possible, Prabhu. Not getting the TV,
that
not
is,
getting internet, the phone.
We think, Madhaji, but I've seen some children who are not having a mobile also. I've seen even elders don't have a mobile.
Exceptional, Prabhu.
Exceptional cases, yes, definitely. But at least we should have some aim. We should aim towards that direction. It is not impossible. It's difficult, but we cannot rule it out.
Yes.
Prabhuji, on the contrary, Hare Krishna, the parents are just giving the children mobile so that the children don't disturb them. They'll give them a mobile.
Wrong practice. So if the parents,
yeah, that's what is happening, Prabhuji. Even to feed the child, they'll put on the TV. They'll give them the mobile.
That is because the parents don't have a goal of life. They don't understand the value of a human form of life.
Yes, that is what is happening.
So they are cause of bondage for themselves as well as for the children.
Yes.
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Nice, wonderful
Thank you,
class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandvat Pranam.
Dandvat Pranam, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, one question. So we see that women have multiple times, I can say, manifold desires, material desires than men. So is it also applicable in the spiritual life? Like her spiritual desires are multiple or multifold than men? Because we see that any association, devotional association, we see that women are more eager and more enthusiastic compared to men. So if you can throw some light.
Yes, sure, Prabhu. As per the Vedic system, generally men were supposed to be capable of undertaking spiritual instructions and spiritual path, and woman being a servant of her husband used to follow that path, and they used to take up the spiritual path also, sharing the husband's opulence and spiritually also. So that is why women were not allowed to perform sacrifices and extra. Men were, even as per Shastra, even today, men only perform sacrifices. Now what has happened is that men have got so much involved into their material activities, and women feel that somewhere there is a vacuum. See, generally when one takes up a spiritual life, because they feel some vacuum. That vacuum I see that women are feeling now, because they don't have the association of men at home. They don't have the association of children at home. So there is some vacuum that is created. So that is where the spiritual life, women are easily able to take it up today, unlike the Esther years. Unlike the Esther years, both men and women were able to take it because the Maya was not so powerful those days. But nowadays, with Maya being so powerful, there is a vacuum that is there in everyone, that they think that they are all enjoying life, but ultimately it is Maya is exploiting them, everybody. Women have started realizing this. That is why when we do a program, we see women are coming in much more bigger numbers than men, because men are feel that they are enjoying their life. Why go to take up the path of spiritual life? It's a fact.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandvat Pranam.
Hare Krishna,
Thank you,
Mataji.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Dandvat Pranam.
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji. Dandvat Pranam.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.